Welcome to the GSMC Business News Podcast, the show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. If you're looking for a podcast to keep you informed and ahead of the game in business, the GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
Thank you for joining the GSMC Business News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Paula DuPont, and we are going to be talking about unemployment, jobs, how businesses are dealing with the current situation, being more innovative and agile, how small businesses are dealing with the current situation, and some innovative approaches that they're taking, and talking about your career. And if you are one of those people who's affected, your job has been affected by the coronavirus, we'll talk about some ideas about what you can be doing now to improve your situation. So I hope you'll stay tuned, and we'll get started. So far, since I've been doing the business news podcasts, and it's been in the midst of this pandemic, and we've talked a lot about the businesses and industries that have been impacted, both negatively and positively, although not as many positively as you can imagine. But I like to look more at one area right now, or one aspect of what's going on in the business world. And it's not directly business, but it's because of business that we have this alarming jobless rate. And I'm going to talk about that, the unemployment. Unfortunately, the news hasn't gotten any better in terms of the number of people who have been laid off or furloughed. Just later this week, the government issued a report saying that an additional 6.6 million workers had lost their jobs. Altogether, that means that in the past 3 weeks, there are over 16 million Americans who have lost their jobs. And that number, while it represents the past 3 weeks, likely doesn't include all numbers of unemployed, including those who were laid off before the pandemic started. So, hate to be a Debbie Downer, but this is the news. And again, that's what I want to kind of explore in this program today, is be able to talk about what can we do about it as individuals. How can we help our own situations? And we're not just one of those numbers if we are indeed one of the ones who has been laid off. The Federal Reserve has redoubled its effort to break that fall this week with an ambitious plan to help companies and state and local governments gain access to funding. The Fed said new programs may mean $2.3 trillion into the economy. And what's important here is the help that small businesses or even larger businesses get will, of course, mean rehiring or holding on to their employees, and hopefully not having the overall jobless rate go up much beyond where it is. However, it seems that we're expecting that to happen. In fact, there are some who speculate that by the end of the month of April, we could have more than 20 million people unemployed, which would push the overall unemployment rate toward 15%. And by contrast, in February, it was 3.5%. That came after a long streak, 113 straight months of job growth. So it's very clear how much the pandemic has caused this surge in unemployment. To add to the duress of losing a job is the fact that filing for unemployment hasn't been without its problems. It varies state to state, but there have been many glitches with states trying to expand their staffing and improve their technology to be able to accommodate this large capacity of newly unemployed. But the problem is these offices are just overpowered. They're overwhelmed with the demand. In some places, in some of the major cities, they say that people have made dozens, even hundreds of attempts to sign into the system to be able to file for their claim, and have not had great success doing that. However, it is, of course you have to keep trying because that money is there, it is available, and it's the system will be able to get that money to you once you're in it. Some states set the level and the duration of unemployment benefits, where the federal $2 trillion Emergency Relief Act, which was just passed 2 weeks ago, expands the state's existing program. So it widens the eligibility and it extends the period for compensation. What that means is that typically most states offer roughly half of a worker's previous wage for up to 26 weeks of unemployment, but the benefits can vary widely among the states. Under the new federal law, jobless workers will get an additional $600 a week each week through July, and they will also be able to receive benefits for an additional 13 weeks. Many states have yet to send out the $600 supplement. New York started issuing the additional money this past week, and the Texas Workforce Commission is working to start the payments by Sunday. That's this weekend. So while the good news is this unemployment is available to those affected, and it will provide much needed relief to help people pay their bills, we know that when you talk about half your salary and then the additional $600, and then of course we're all expecting the $1,200 emergency assistance checks that we should be getting soon. I believe it's supposed to happen the beginning of the week, starting April 13th. They will start going out. That doesn't mean you're going to get yours the next day, but at least that they're getting out into the system. Another thing is that, and maybe it's another piece of good news, is that a lot of businesses, landlords, mortgage companies, credit card companies, and others are offering terms or ways to provide some assistance or forgiveness for payments. I'm not saying that you're going to get out of paying your rent or your mortgage or that your credit card bills will go away, but many of those companies have messages on their websites about if you're having trouble paying your bill, please go to this link, and then they will offer some ideas about how you can do it, or perhaps change the terms of your loan. So I think where there is compassion or some flexibility in terms of paying back these different creditors, those are definite opportunities to pursue. And I think at this time it's worthwhile to go to the websites of any of the companies that you make regular payments to and see what they have to offer. Again, you're probably not going to get out of paying those bills altogether, but if there's some flexibility there that you can take advantage of, at least until we figure this all out, and hopefully things will start to improve, in the short months ahead. So in our next segment, because we're going to take a quick break, in our next segment we're going to talk about the airline industry and how it's being impacted and what that's looking like right now. So stay tuned and we'll be right back.
Are you looking for a podcast that gives you all of the latest news from the world of finance? Then check out the GSMC Financial News Podcast. We'll delve into the ups and downs of the stock market, changes in the economy, and news from the world of real estate and technology. From breaking news on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or the overseas market, to updates on the bond market, if there's money to be made, we'll cover it on the GSMC Financial News Podcast.
Hi, I'm back, and as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the airline industry and how that has been impacted. And there are a number of headlines recently dealing with the airline industry. One was that there were 100, at the time that this news came out the other day, 100 American Airlines flight attendants tested positive for COVID. And other airlines, of course, have had some reported cases as well, although there's some uncertainty as to if they're really able to accurately capture that, because airline attendants aren't considered any different than anyone else in terms of their prioritization in getting tested. And there are some who feel that they should have a different kind of priority because of the nature of their jobs, and that they travel to different cities across the country. They're in hotels, they're in airports and places, other public places, and they are exposed to a lot of people throughout their job. And so there are some that feel, I believe the union that represents the flight attendants at American Airlines are among those that feel that they should be treated as though they were frontline workers with the priority that they get for testing. So that's just one area that there's been a little bit of conflict with recently. Another is that we know overall there have been many flights that have been canceled because of the travel bans, and also the stay-at-home mandate that's in most states in this country. So people aren't traveling as much. There isn't the need for all the amounts of flights that they've had. And so there's been some consolidation of flight routes. And with that has come also a little bit of heat about the fact that as customers are trying to get refunds for their tickets, they're getting them in some places and they're not in others. And of course, some of that depends on if you had a non-refundable ticket or not. So there hasn't been a widespread approach to how to refund for tickets. However, the U.S. Transportation Department said last week that the airlines are ordered now to provide refunds if the flights are canceled. So, of course, that means if the airlines themselves are canceling the flights, that they need to refund the customers for that. As I said, workers at other airlines are concerned about the exposure to the potential exposure to COVID and wanting to have more testing done. So, overall, it's been an issue, and the impact of the pandemic. However, the industry has been struggling for a while, even before the pandemic hit. Not every industry, not every airline, but a lot of them have been facing some tough times. And then the pandemic hit. The amount of reduced travel and all the restrictions has just taken an enormous toll, and that's why there's been some anxiousness to find out how the $32 billion payroll grant that comes from the recently approved stimulus package, the one that was approved a couple weeks ago, where the $32 billion was earmarked for the airline industry, with most of it being available for payroll grants for airlines, and then also it would help the cargo carriers and airport workers. So there just about everybody connected with the airline industry would have an opportunity to benefit in some way from that. Under the $2.3 trillion CARES Act, that's the stimulus act that I was just talking about, passenger airlines are eligible for $25 billion of that in cash grants for payroll. Cargo carriers can get $4 billion, while airport contractors like caterers and airplane cleaners are eligible for $3 billion. From that pot of money, the 6 largest U.S. airlines, that's American, United, Delta, Southwest, JetBlue, and Alaska Airlines, they are expected to get around 90% of that $32 billion package. The Treasury received around 275 applicants for the aviation grants. The airline industry has been trying to find out how they can go and get these grants and actually put them to use. And although the whole package was approved a couple weeks ago, how it works, who's eligible, and actually getting the grant money has not happened yet. However, the president says that this weekend there may be releasing the details about how that's going to work and, what the terms will be for that payroll grant. And one of the things that looks like is being considered is that the Treasury could require companies to repay a portion of the amount at a low interest rate. It seems that great care is being given to how this help to the airline industry is going to be implemented. I think, some of this perhaps comes from the bailout of the banks years ago and trying not to make some of the same mistakes that were made then and improve the accountability for these grants. So it looks as though the federal government is being responsive and trying to help out the airlines, at the same time setting it up in such a way that the airlines will use the money efficiently and in the way that is going to help keep workers, keep the industry going, and we'll do that in a way that's responsible. So, we at least hope that that's what's going to happen. And again, we may get more of those details this weekend. A good friend of mine works for a major airline, and I was just having a conversation with him today, and he was reminding me that some months ago he was considering going to a different airline where they had some things that were better for his lifestyle than working for the current airline, and also the benefits and some cultural issues. And I guess for any of us who've worked, period, I won't just say in the corporate world, but anywhere, you find, that there are those things sometimes that you don't like about the current employer. And as they say, the grass looks greener elsewhere, and you look to go, perhaps to another company, comparable company. And it takes times like this when you reflect on the fact that maybe that you didn't take that leap or that you didn't take that job. Maybe that's a good thing, considering everything else is going on. And in fact, in his particular circumstances, the shift would have been, it would have been really risky considering what's going on right now in terms of job security and even pay and some of the other benefits. So as they say, sometimes things work out for a reason, whoever they are, but it's what we say from time to time. We, right? The proverbial we, the proverbial they. So we're going to take a brief break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some more positive kinds of news stories. And these are dealing with businesses who have been nimble and innovative in stepping outside of their comfort zones and trying something new and trying another way to meet demand in this very challenging time. So more on that when we come back.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings-on of those worlds? The GSMC Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
Hi, I'm back, and I wanted to talk about innovation. And there is that expression that says that necessity is the mother of invention. I guess you can't get much more of a necessity, a call for action, than the current pandemic. And for some reason, well, for many reasons, it has sparked a tremendous amount of innovation and excitement from many companies who are looking at what they do a little differently and seeing what they can do to meet the needs that are going on right now. And there are many needs, and they're evolving as we go on, from the changes that we have in the workplace to the needs of the healthcare workers to the needs of patients and those affected directly by having the virus. So there's a lot of opportunity for invention and for innovation, and indeed a lot of companies have stepped up. I've talked a little bit about companies who have stepped up in previous podcasts, including GM, who has retooled one of its production facilities to design and create ventilators, and they've been working with a ventilator company in order to do the design and be able to mass produce these in bigger quantities. So they've already been doing that. I also recently talked about how 3D printing is being used throughout the country to make face shields and visors and some other protective personal protective equipment. So there have been a lot of answers to that call, but I thought I would talk a little bit about some of the specific ones recently, or interesting ones that have come up that you might not have thought of. For instance, a company in New Jersey that makes bedding materials, they are now making face masks and using the material that they use there for the bedding. Another company, I'm kind of embarrassed to say, their name is Aunt Flo, which makes tampons, is also making face masks. I'll just leave it at that. And Dyson, known for their design for their vacuum cleaners, has designed its own version of a ventilator called Covent, and they've committed to making thousands of them. In addition, I first thought it was a novel idea that in my area, a local distillery decided to convert their stills to make hand sanitizer. Well, it turns out that now there are about 600 distilleries across the country that are doing the same thing. Even some of the big names like Bacardi rum is one of them. and other makers of whiskey, vodka, and other types of spirits are now making hand sanitizer. And they're talking like in terms of, 400,000 bottles worth of hand sanitizer. So it's pretty significant. So we might not be getting drunk, but we're staying clean. And that's probably a good thing. There are other companies as well. Ford has produced 2.4 million face shields. And they were able to do this by putting an operation together within maybe a week or two's time, which is pretty significant when you think about all of the hurdles that a company has to leap in order to get a product out. And you're talking about from scratch, from designing the product, designing the assembly line, getting the materials, clearing regulatory hurdles. All those different things can really delay a product from getting out there. But there's a different kind of spirit that comes with working towards this cause. I think many of us feel helpless or would like to feel that we're doing something to help, to really help, when we know that the ones who are making the biggest impact are those who are working directly with patients and trying to help them stay alive and to recover. And so getting back to businesses, I think that the people who run these businesses feel much the same way as we do as individuals in wanting to help. And if you have a company that is expert in certain areas and there's some way to make it happen, this is the time to do it, and that's what they're doing. Here are a couple other companies that are doing some innovative things. One is an outdoor cushion maker, a company called Pollywood, which makes furniture from recycled plastic, is responding to the call by an Indiana hospital that has reached out and asked them to make 1 million cloth surgical masks. So the company has enlisted the help of its sewing team that normally assembles outdoor furniture cushions to help create the masks. And along with a partner in Revolution Fabrics, they're currently testing different fabric blends for breathability. Another company that is doing something innovative is actually an app, and it was an app that was designed for events and festivals called Zelos. And when the virus broke out in Northern Europe, Zelos connected their app to a collaboration app, Trello, within 48 hours and created a helpline for senior citizens. The elderly call the helpline, and an operator uses Trello to push information to volunteers' smartphones. Within 24 hours, they had signed up more than 1,000 volunteers, and within 2 days were helping seniors to get groceries and avoid the 3-day wait times that they had. Because this is actually in, as I said, Northern Europe, in Estonia specifically. The founders don't have resources to scale this idea beyond Estonia, but they are looking for those interested in implementing this idea in their communities. So that's another interesting one. Okay, here's one that's really unique. It's an online bar. I'm sure some people out there in this country have thought about it, but how that would actually work and if it would work, probably stopped people from trying it here. But in Russia, they created a site, and I have to be careful how I say this. It's called Stay the FCK Home Bar. It was launched in Russia, and it's a bar that they say it's open 24/7. And they did this to encourage more people to stay at home during the COVID pandemic. Well, in its initial 24 hours since it opened, 30,000 users visited the site. And during the first week, more than 120,000 people visited the online bar. The virtual video conferencing bar is without borders, where people from all over the world can meet, have a drink, and try to not lose their collective minds by supporting each other. So there you have it. So those were just some of the innovative ideas, and there's tons more of apps and companies and businesses that have reshaped themselves in order to respond to the pandemic. So once again, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I have a few personal stories to share with some small businesses that are taking some unique ways to deal with the pandemic. So we'll talk about that when I get back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Okay, I'm back. And this time, I'm going to deviate a little bit from what I've been talking about in some of the other segments, where I've been talking about big businesses and headlines that have gone across the country, big statistics, and some dire news. And instead, I'd like to talk about a segment I'll call the hairstylist, the lobsterman, and the bootlegger. And if it sounds like it's a setup for one of those stories, or they walk into a bar and da-da-da-da-da. Well, it's not that kind of story, because nobody's walking into a bar right now. But unless you're going to the Russian bar online that I was talking about before. In any case, these are businesses who are small businesses that have found their own way to respond to the demands of the time, and if nothing else, make their customers feel a little bit better. So let me start with the first one, with the hairstylist. So I've known Alfonso now for a while, for a few years, and like the other people who come to see him, he's the one to go to. I haven't changed hairdressers in quite a while. He's very good. And going to him is, it also involves therapy that you get by talking with him. So it's a fun experience. And you come out feeling really good. And so most of his customers feel that way. And apparently he's been getting lots of calls during this time when we're all staying at home. And he's been getting calls from people who are kind of desperate and pleading with him to either open up his shop, to let them come in for an appointment, or asking him to come to their houses. And, he feels really bad, because he knows that it's not just about vanity, where people are just so dying to have the latest look, or to, just really look good because they're going out to a certain occasion. It's for themselves. It's for their own morale. And sometimes, too, he said, it's because you have conference calls and people can see you right up close and personal, and if your hair hasn't been colored in a while and it needs it, you're going to see that. So there have been people who are they've become more conscious of how their hair looks, wanting to get it done. And I said, did you consider doing that? because he's one of these people, he's a workaholic. He's always working, and when he's not in his shop working, he's going to New York or Atlantic City to do shows and demonstrate different techniques. So I was thinking that this is probably killing him to be at home. Surprisingly, it's not. But in any case, he was getting these calls for help, and he said he'd feel selfish if he did that. Because even though he felt reasonably sure he could protect himself and that his clients, were probably careful, he wouldn't do that just, for the money or put anybody at risk. But at the same time, he felt like he wanted to take care of the customers who have been so good to him over the years. So what he did was he called his product distributor, who makes the hair color, and between them they put together what they're calling a survival kit with the hair color, with the mixing bowl, with a few other accessories that are needed to do your own hair. And he would customize each survival kit according to the hair color that the customer had. And so he would get the shipments in from the distributor, package them up, and he would make them available curbside. People could pull up in their cars, could go out and grab it, leave a check in the mailbox. And he said that he actually isn't making any money on them because it's just covering his costs, what he makes and what he's got to pay the distributor. And in fact, it doesn't cover the shipping expenses that he has in getting the orders in. And I said, well, why aren't you marking it up? Why aren't you making some money on it? And he said, I know times are tough and there are a lot of people out of work and there are people afraid if they're going to end up losing their jobs. And I know how much that getting your hair done does for people's morale. And he said, I'm not in it to make the money. He said, I know that if I do the right thing, that it'll turn out okay. And he said his customers have always treated him well throughout the years. So I think it's one of those pay it forward kinds of things. So I just thought that was interesting that he did that. And I wish I had known that before I took matters in my own hands, but nonetheless, I know it now, so I'm grateful. The other story I wanted to talk about is the lobsterman. And the lobsterman is actually lobster woman, I guess, or at least the representative is a woman. My sister, who lives on the southeast coast of Maine, was out walking her dog in the neighborhood, and one of her neighbors who was driving down the street stopped to say hi to her and asked her if she liked lobster. And, which is kind of a silly question to ask someone in southeastern Maine because I think that's pretty much an entrance requirement to living there. Nonetheless, she asked her if she liked lobster, and she said, my husband is a lobsterman, and I can get you lobster. And, he's able to do that now. Now, a side note is I was reading recently that fishermen in general are having a real hard time right now because the restaurants are closed. They don't have the restaurants to support them. So somebody who's out there, making a livelihood catching lobsters, they need to have somewhere to sell it. So she actually, I don't know if it was a drive-through service or what you would call it, because she, pulled up, opened the window and took an order from my sister for the lobster. So there you have it. There's another innovative way of doing it. I'm not sure how efficient that is, and I'm not sure how many neighbors would actually be outside walking their dogs. So I don't know if she drives around town or what else the game plan is there, but either way, I think it's pretty innovative. So as for the bootlegger story, we'll get to that after this next break.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
So we're back, and we're talking about small businesses that I'm aware of and what they're doing to meet the needs of their customers and stepping outside of the typical way that they do business. So this next story that I have is about someone I know who has worked in the hospitality industry for a long time, working as a bartender, a server, in management, and most recently with a company that distributes to restaurants and bars. And it was actually through that job that he was seeing, as he went out to these different clients that he had, that sometimes he was getting requests from the owners to talk to their employees to help explain the difference in the different types of alcohol that some of the people that they were hiring, not necessarily bartenders, but other new servers and other people, that they didn't have a lot of front of house experience. So this friend of mine would provide these kind of ad hoc trainings to help them understand the difference between different types of alcohol and liquors and how you serve them and just some other things like that. So now that there's a time where business has lulled and he's no longer able to work with a lot of his clients because of the fact that their businesses are closed, he's seen a real need to fill in helping restaurants get ready for when they are back, and to get their staffs up to speed and get them ready to go out there, especially where you'll find that perhaps there will be new people out there to work in the restaurant business, those who would be normally coming back from college at the end of spring and now are home already. I'm not sure if they're going to be ready to go back into working just yet, because presumably a lot of them are still doing classes online. But nonetheless, anytime you would have a seasonal change in work, you have new people coming in, and there's a bit of a gap there. And let's face it, the restaurants and bars have a real need to, hit the ground running when they do get back up, to make up for when they were closed. So this friend of mine created a consulting business where he can provide training to these companies, to these bars and restaurants, and helping them get their staffs up to speed. And they have a few different basic courses that seem to be something that would be really useful. In fact, as a customer, something that I might want to do, but just because I don't know the difference between bourbon and whiskey, and what are the differences or in between tequila and mezcal, and why does scotch taste like it does, and some of those things that some people have a fine palate for that, and they've been accumulating that interest. But your typical server who's coming into the business, they may not have that understanding. So some neat training programs that they offer. So there's this Spirits 101. There's one that's suggestive selling and upselling, where the manager may want the servers to promote certain menu items more, desserts, try to sell those. And, also there's another class in basic cocktails, like what's up or dirty or dry, and be able to talk about those and be able to relay that to their customers. This seems to be a pretty useful thing, and it fills a need, right? I'm not sure that it's specifically a pandemic need, but when you consider, again, what the restaurant and bar industry is going through right now, some of them being able to remain open to fulfill takeout orders or pickup orders, it's not anything like when they're open full-time and able to have people come in. So they're going to have a lot of making up to do when they get back. Hopefully they will all come back. And again, they need to hit the ground running. And what better way to do that but have a staff that's ready to go? So, and people have time on their hands now too. So doing a training, this is kind of a good time to do that. So it's front of the house training, and I'm not aware that there's anyone else with that kind of thing. But when you have a background in a certain area, it makes sense to see where else you might be able to exploit that or cultivate that into something that will be prosperous for you and fulfilling. And so this is something, again, my friend has a lot of knowledge in. And that kind of brings me to what I mentioned in the earlier part of this podcast about what you can do if you're someone who has been laid off and you find yourself now looking for a job among a whole lot of other people and looking for a job in a career maybe you've been working in all along, that maybe is still continuing to be affected by the virus. And so you may be at this crossroads of figuring out, what are you going to do next? Are you going to try to get a job back in the same business that you were in? Are you going to try to do something different? Are you going to try to open your own business, a consulting business, or something else? So these are questions that are facing, obviously, a lot of people out there right now. And some people maybe haven't been in this situation in a while, and probably no one's been in this situation of having a whole lot of other people vying for the same jobs. That doesn't mean that there isn't a good fit for you somewhere. What it does mean is that this is a time where you may want to evaluate what it is that you really want, and not just what's the first job you can grab. You may be in that situation, and I can understand that. I've been there before too. But if you have a little time to think about it, and you might right now, you can actually look at different types of aptitude tests and explore different books and online sites that help you to evaluate what your strengths are, what are some of your interests, things that you've always been a little bit curious about. Now's the time to explore them and to research them. And one of the tools that I think is an excellent one for people is LinkedIn. I mean, a lot of us are on social media right now. Why not get on social media for business that may help you to find a job? If you don't have a LinkedIn site or presence, it's easy to do. It doesn't cost anything. They do have a premium service, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But you can get a free membership, and what you're doing is you're not posting the latest cat meme, but you're actually trying to build a network. And I can't think of a better way right now when you can't go out to actual networking meetings or other places where you would meet people in person to network than to do it virtually and use something that was designed just for that purpose, LinkedIn. And there are other possibilities too through apps that can address some of these things. But in terms of, kind of the main tool that can help you with getting your name out there, finding other people who may help you get a job, finding other people who might already have an established career in an area that you're interested in, but you're not in currently. If you connect with them, you may find ways that you can enhance your resume and your job skills even right now, or at least start building on that. And you can do that with networking with people who already have jobs that you're interested in. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we come back after this commercial.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
So in the last segment, I talked about a friend of mine who is not able to work at their regular job right now, but looked at their past experience and the strengths that they have and the knowledge that they have and created a consulting business to do training, to use that knowledge. And I talked a little bit about LinkedIn and what you can do to start your journey if you are one of the people right now who is unemployed. And by no means is there a cookie cutter approach to it, and I don't proclaim to have the answers. I just know I've had a lot of different jobs so far in my life as well, and a lot of them were very disparate and far from each other. I mean, I did things like waitress at a comedy club. I sold used formal wear at flea markets. I was a substitute teacher. One of the things that has left a lasting physical impression on me was when I was a student nurse for osteopathic doctors who had to treat patients, student patients. These were actors basically. They had to treat them in order to pass their medical exam. And I was one of those student patients who posed with a back problem that had to be fixed. And they attempted to fix it. And since my back wasn't hurting when I began, it did by the end of it. Nonetheless, I'm just saying that we all have different paths to take. And sometimes it takes a few tries before you find the one that you're going to stick with and the one that makes sense. I never saw myself doing any of those for a living or long term, but that was just part of my journey. But for those of you, again, who are facing some uncertainty and, you're pausing, hopefully you're going to be getting the unemployment, you've taken the time to get online and sign up for benefits. And, it's not really... it's the answer right now just to live off of that, but maybe you can take a deep breath for a moment and reassess what you want to do when you grow up. And I mentioned before LinkedIn as a tool to help network, because networking is a great way to land your next job. It's a great way to expand your network or learn about other areas that you might be interested in. And those would be, you'd reach out to someone in your network, you ask if you could talk to them, you look at their background that they have listed on there, and if it's something that resonates with you, you try to have some sort of dialogue with that person. And, through that, you can figure out your next steps, which, would also include, obviously, updating your resume. You want to make sure that you have, that you're using the latest format for your resume. There are people out there who can redesign your resume for you and help place information in the correct places. But you don't have to pay someone to do that. There are plenty of templates online that you can draw from to do that. And that's, but you'll definitely need that and have that ready. You want to make sure that you're including your most recent experience, not only the actual job, but if in the meantime you learned any particular new skill or you've done any volunteer work or something else pertinent, that would be a good thing to add. It's also a good time right now to look at a lot of the free training and webinars that are online that you could take advantage of to learn different skills. I mentioned earlier that LinkedIn does have a premium service where you pay a membership fee. I believe the first 30 days you can do a trial period for free. If you do have that membership, you have access to all of their online learning programs, and they've got a very large library of types of programs that you can do, and some of them will they lead to something like a certification, and then when you have completed a training in a certain area, you actually get like a little badge that shows up on your LinkedIn profile so that it's there that you completed it. And of course, I probably don't have to mention that YouTube offers an awful lot of different tutorials to learn things from podcasting to picture taking to how you do hair or how you do landscaping. There are any number of those out there. But I think it has to start with you having some idea of what are the kinds of things that you enjoy. Do you like being outside? Would you rather work with data? Do you like people? Would you rather work on your own in a cubicle somewhere? Do you want to be able to work from home? Do you want something that's flexible to help you with balancing your work and family life? So all those things, this is a good time to examine that and then look at what careers will be compatible for that. And as I said, there's a number of things out there. Just, Google it if it's something that you're interested in and see where that leads you. Someone had said to me not long ago, asked me what my personal mission statement was. And I thought that was kind of odd. It kind of took me off guard a little bit because I obviously didn't have one. But it made me think about that. And it's something that's been still formulating in my mind as I look at what's important to me. What do I want to look back on eventually? And I know these maybe are first world problems, and some of us are just looking to survive and to pay the bills in some way, shape, or form. And I get that. And that is, of course, the priority. It's all about, the hierarchy of needs and where you are in that. But I'm just saying that if you find yourself at a time where you can't go out physically to fill out applications or talk to people, and you're stuck at home and you have a smartphone or you have a computer, there's an awful lot that can help you to explore, what your next career move might be. And maybe it's not your next career move. Maybe it's where you're eventually going to get. So maybe you do have to take something in the short term, again, to pay the bills. But don't lose sight of the bigger picture and where you want to be at the end of all this. So that's just my, I'll say 5 cents, since it was definitely more than 2 cents. Hopefully there's something there that can help you and get you started. And just know that there's a lot of us out there who are in the same boat, and a lot of us out here who support you and empathize. and including a future employer who understands that it wasn't your fault that you lost your job. So you have a lot to offer, and hopefully you can get set up to find the right match for you when it's time to do so. So that concludes today's podcast, and I hope that there's some inspiration to be drawn from this and from some of the companies that have turned lemons into lemonade, and maybe reflect some of the values that we have, where we, as I said, we want to help, we want to be part of the solution, and there's definitely companies out there that are doing that, regardless of how much it contributes to their bottom line. They're stepping up to the call for action right now. And who knows, maybe one of them will be your future employer one day. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining the GSMC Business News Podcast. Please make sure to join us on our Facebook and Twitter pages. Leave some comments. We would love to hear from you, and we'd love to have ideas of other things that you would like us to talk about. Take care. Good night.
You've been listening to the GSMC Business News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type GSMC into your favorite podcast app to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's podcast.